Samuell Farm Trail Beast.
First of all, I am going to start with about me.
I am an ex-alcoholic.
I am into fetishism. I'm also an ex-medical practitioner who has worked in various countries in my youth as a doctor.
I hit alcoholism upon my return to where I grew up, Mesquite, Texas.
I have been through several traumas and abuses within my life. You can discredit me because of this. I don't mind, but I am here to share a true story, and I am here to finally speak my voice on what happened to me in May 2004 in Samuell Farm Trails. Asterisk. I was working as a general practitioner for a cosmetic surgery company. It was a very dodgy company, but I was an alcoholic, so I didn't care. I just was there for paper documentation, or if some of the patients needed meds for swelling or other
ails, I was there to diagnose and sign off.
The company got investigated. Big trial at the time. And I got blacklisted. I deserved it. I didn't care anymore.
The abuse and trauma I suffered through the years bubbled up inside me, and self-hatred
was brewing.
That caused me to not care about other human beings, which is sad because I am a naturally loving and
empathetic person. The whiskey and the breakdown changed me into something bestial. So I was sent to rehab mid-February.
And was well enough to leave the beginning of May.
The one thing that I really enjoyed was sitting out in the garden of the clinic and being back at one with nature. So upon my release back into the fast-paced world,
I took up hiking and meditation in nature.
I lived with my mom in Mesquite, so escaping back into the local Texan nature was what I needed to keep up my good habits from the rehab and to also give my mom her personal space. So I decided I was going to go on an early morn hike along Samuell Farm Trail and spend a DSY afternoon there. I brought a backpack containing essentials and lunch. Y'all know in Mesquite the trees are pretty dense and thorny, but I could appreciate the level of beauty that came from
the dusky trees.
It reminded me of my journey from saint to sinner and back in the forgiveness of God. I was in Mother Nature's womb now, healing from all the trauma I endured at the hands of my grandmother, and also the rape I endured when I was a young man by a married woman. Despite my traumas, I had no hate for women. In fact, the way I self-destructed was through my macabre fetishes. I will throw my hands up and say that yes, I am damaged, but let's not strike that into our minds and our hearts for what I am about to tell you. I met not many on the trail. I briefly talked to a couple. I remember specifically because the male had a British accent, and the female had a Texan accent, and they asked me could I take a photograph of them amidst the backdrop of the meandering trail. I happily obliged. We talked for about 10 minutes about the weather. How lucky we were. I briefly talked about my familial connection to the UK, and I remember the man told me he moved on out to be with his wife. I thought that was sweet. We probably had small talk. I can't remember much, but we left our conversation on a smile and a farewell. I was walking an hour on trail when it started to pour rain. I found an opening in the trees, so I walked down into the trees to see if I could stand under the shelter of a branch. I did. I waited there until the shower stopped. I remember thinking how pissy it was that usually we'd be hit by dry spells, we'd be begging for rain, and the day I head out it starts. I chuckled to myself that it was typical. I remember letting out a chuckle and I heard a low hoo, as if someone was trying to mock my chuckle. I hollered, "Who's there?" Very funny. And I then was greeted with two big stomps, like a man's heavy work boots stomping into the earth. I thought to myself, how weird for someone in work boots out in the park. I wasn't far into the brush from the trail, so I assumed someone seen me go in and followed me. I slowly looked around and I couldn't see anyone. I pulled out my taser that I carried. I carry it as a self-defense tool. I know I shouldn't be, it's just in case. And I lifted it up and said, "I want no trouble." Just out of my walk, and there was a massive hiss and the boots took off running. I looked in the direction of the noise and seen nothing. So I was spooked, but put it down to teenagers or someone out on the trails trying to spook folks. I walked back up from the trees back onto the trail. I contemplated on walking up more on the trail or heading back, because I was spooked. I then decided that a lousy person trying to scare me was not going to put me off my walk. I had my taser. My cell and the park rangers were always close hand. I decided to ring the park number on the cell and alert the rangers of this person trying to spook. The rangers said they'd be out looking and that often teenagers find it funny to play act in the forest, so I felt reassured.
I decided to take the turning point onto the forest trail.
I wanted to meditate beside the trees and to eat my lunch. I was hungry and I felt loss of energy. So I hiked for a good 15 to 20 minutes until I found the most beautiful gathering of trees and foresteel fauna. I sat my light plaid picnic blanket with the heavy-duty foiling on the back, so it can double as a survival blanket. I sat down on it on the forest floor, picked me out my pickle and ham sandwich and went to town on that bad boy. Had myself a juice box. I love juice boxes. Big kid, I felt like just eating my sandwich, supping on my juice box, enjoying the forest surroundings. After my lunch, I crossed my legs into my meditation pose and just concentrated. My point of focus is always to be back as my child self again. I always greet little James and welcome him. I then imagine myself as little James amongst the trees, just being a boy. It's very comforting and healing for me. I opened my eyes to imagine little James just running up toward the tree that was in my sightline and just climbing it to explore, when I noticed a large hand snake around the tree and a face that I can only describe as a really
ugly half-man half-chimp. I thought I nodded off and was hallucinating in my meditative state, so I snapped out of it.
But the face was still there, peering around the tree at me. I remember feeling frozen to the spot. I studied the face and I met eye contact with this weird guy. When next minute he opened his mouth and there was a row of sharp, almost Malamute-like teeth, but yellowed and decayed, being bared at me. I jumped up because the hiss and gurgle that left that dude's mouth was not normal or of this earth. I grabbed my bag and just bolted. I left my lunchbox, blanket and taser out on the ground. I ran for my life. I could hear the hiss and gurgle in the background and I kept running and running until I couldn't hear it anymore. I
could only hear my heart thumping in my ears.
I felt so woozy, but adrenaline kept me running for my damn life. I wasn't even light. I was fairly heavy up top back then. I scrambled back on the trail and power walked the whole way back.
I power walked past people on the trail and I couldn't even greet them.
They must have thought I committed a crime or something, because I was red-faced, huffing and power walking to get back toward the opening of the park to my vehicle. I never felt fear like it in my life. Not even from times I was in awkward situations in Africa or life-threatening situations when I worked in the bush in Australia. I felt like I was going to die and never to be seen again. I kept replaying that Neanderthal's face in my mind. He looked half man and half chimp. That's the only way I can describe him. The hand was huge. I would like to draw him out, but I am not good at drawing, but I could attempt it. I've only ever told 2 people about my encounter. I've told my mother upon my return home, and thankfully she believed me, because I was very depressed and in shock for 3 weeks after the event. I wouldn't eat properly. I couldn't even take my mother to her doctor's appointments because
the parking lot was surrounded by trees. For a whole year I lived as a recluse.
The second person I told was a therapist, who helped me come to terms with what I witnessed. He did not discredit me. He just listened. Whether he believed me or not, I do not know. But his kindness and his listening ear helped me heal. I have not been on the trail again since. I am too fearful of it. I rarely pass Samuell Farm, but when I do, I have to do my therapy instructions to zone out from the surrounding landscape. I have heard that people have had similar experiences, but I've never came across a survivors group. I wish there was one. I can never ever for the life of me ever explain what I witnessed. The only way I will ever go back to that trail again is if there was armed guards. That is how fearful I am. This has took me a while to write because I still have PTSD. In advance, I just want to thank y'all for the opportunity to listen to me. I feel it's finally time to share Ezring. This lockdown I've felt the fear of his return bigger than ever.
It may be just being alone and in my head since my
mother has passed on and I've only got my 2 cats for company. Regards, James.